Do you like mysteries? To wander through the enigmatic mist of the inexplicable? Great. I'm Merc, and here you'll find what you're looking for. Welcome to my domains. The truth dissolves into the mist.
Darkness did not arrive suddenly in London in 1666. It crept in slowly, through whispers, prophecies, and quiet fears carried from one year to the next. As the city crossed into a new year, bells rang, candles burned, and people celebrated survival. Yet beneath the noise, something else was unfolding. A belief that the coming year would not be ordinary, that fire would cleanse, destroy, and reveal truths meant to remain hidden. In the final days of the previous year, pamphlets circulated through taverns and churches, warning of divine judgment. Texts spoke of flames rising from the heart of the city, of towers collapsing, and of a great structure in the north consumed by an unnatural fire. Most dismissed them as superstition, remnants of plague-driven paranoia. Others listened carefully, because London had already learned what it meant to ignore warnings. The city was fragile, still recovering from the Great Plague. Streets were overcrowded, buildings were tightly packed, and fear was woven into daily life. Fire was a constant threat, but no one imagined the scale of what was coming. What unsettled historians centuries later was not the fire itself, but how accurately certain predictions described its path, timing, and destruction. Among these predictions were references to a northern tower, a place described as standing watch over the city, symbolic, tall, and vulnerable. Later interpretations would associate this with structures near the northern sections of the old city, including towers tied to administration, storage, and religious authority. Cinematic. The language used in the prophecies was vague enough to be ignored, yet precise enough to haunt those who survived. As the year turned, astrologers published charts aligning celestial movements with catastrophe. Eclipses, planetary conjunctions, and unusual star patterns were interpreted as signs of judgment by fire. These publications were not fringe ideas. Astrology was widely accepted, consulted by nobles and clergy alike. When astrologers warned of flames tied to the coming year, people paid attention, even if they pretended not to. One particular manuscript, attributed to a little-known mystic whose name was later erased from official records, spoke of a fire that would begin small and grow unstoppable. It mentioned that the fire would spare no status, no wealth, no faith. Most chilling was its reference to a tower in the north, described as a silent witness that would fall not by chance, but by design. Was this symbolism, coincidence, or something more deliberate? As winter passed and the new year advanced, London continued its routines. Markets opened, churches filled, and political tensions simmered quietly beneath the surface. England was not at peace internally. Distrust of foreigners, religious divisions, and rumors of sabotage circulated constantly. When fire eventually came, many would question whether it was an accident, an attack, or a fulfillment of something foretold. In early September, flames erupted in a bakery on Pudding Lane. At first it seemed manageable. Fires were common, but the wind was strong, and the city was dry. Within hours, the fire began to spread faster than any before it. Entire streets vanished. Panic replaced reason. And as people fled northward, eyes turned toward the towers that prophecy had warned about. Reports from survivors mention a strange sense of inevitability. Some claimed they had dreamed of the fire months before. Others recalled sermons delivered at the start of the year, urging repentance before flames arrived. Whether these memories were altered by trauma or grounded in real warnings remains uncertain. What is known is that, as the fire advanced, it reached the northern sections of the city, consuming structures once thought safe. Towers collapsed, records burned, and history itself was erased. The destruction was so complete that reconstruction required rewriting the very layout of London. After the fire was extinguished, attention returned to the prophecies. Authorities downplayed them. Pamphlets disappeared. Astrological charts were confiscated. The narrative became one of accident and unfortunate conditions. Yet some documents survived, hidden in private collections, rediscovered centuries later. When modern historians compared these texts to the actual events, the parallels were disturbing. Timelines aligned, locations matched, and the Northern Tower, whether literal or symbolic, stood at the center of both prediction and destruction. If these prophecies were genuine, how were they so accurate? And if they were fabricated after the fact, why did authorities feel the need to suppress them? As the ashes settled over London, a new year eventually arrived. The city rebuilt, but something fundamental had changed. Trust in destiny, prophecy, and divine warning lingered in the collective memory. And every time the year turned, some remembered that London once ignored the signs and paid the price in fire. What remains unanswered is whether the Great Fire was merely a tragic convergence of circumstance, or the final chapter of a story written long before the flames ever ignited. And if those prophecies were real, one question remains. Were they meant as a warning, or as a record of something that could not be stopped? In the years following the fire, London tried to bury the memory beneath stone and order. Streets were widened, buildings redesigned, and new laws imposed to prevent another catastrophe. But fire leaves scars that architecture cannot erase. It leaves questions, doubts, and shadows that linger far longer than smoke. Survivors spoke quietly about how the fire seemed to move with intention. Not randomly, not blindly. Entire blocks were spared while others were annihilated. Some claimed the flames curved against the wind. Others said the fire roared louder near certain structures, as if drawn to them. These testimonies were dismissed as hysteria, yet their consistency was unsettling. Attention slowly returned to the Northern Tower mentioned in the prophecies. Records showed that key documents were stored there, including tax rolls, legal archives, and correspondence tied to political power. When the tower burned, those records were lost forever. Debts vanished, accusations dissolved, and identities were erased. For some, the fire was a tragedy. For others, it was liberation. This raised a disturbing possibility. If the prophecies were known, even partially, who stood to benefit from their fulfillment? The official investigation concluded that the fire was accidental, caused by negligence and unfavorable conditions. Yet no one was ever truly held accountable. Blame shifted endlessly, often toward foreigners or the poor. Meanwhile, whispers persisted that certain individuals had evacuated their possessions days before the fire began, as if they knew exactly when the flames would rise. Astrological charts tied to the new year resurfaced decades later, preserved in private estates. These charts did not merely predict fire. They spoke of renewal through destruction, of an old order collapsing so a new one could emerge. Fire was not punishment, but transformation. This concept deeply unsettled religious authorities. If fire was part of a cosmic cycle rather than divine wrath, then control over fear was lost. It may explain why discussions of prophecy were gradually pushed to the margins, rebranded as superstition or madness. Yet the pattern did not end in 1666. Throughout history, major fires, revolutions, and collapses have coincided with symbolic dates, particularly the turning of the year. New Year has always represented more than time passing. It represents thresholds, moments where endings and beginnings overlap, where predictions feel closer to reality. In London, the memory of the fire quietly influenced how people approached the new year. Superstitions grew stronger. Fire rituals changed. Bells were rung longer. Prayers were whispered louder. Not to celebrate, but to ward something off. Today, the Northern Tower no longer exists, at least not in its original form. Tourists walk over the ground where it once stood, unaware of what burned beneath their feet. The prophecies are rarely mentioned, and when they are framed as coincidences. But coincidence struggles to explain precision. If the fire was foretold, then the past was not as chaotic as we like to believe. And if the past followed a script, then the future may not be as open as it seems. Every new year arrives with promises, resolutions, and hope. But history reminds us that it can also arrive with warnings, written quietly, ignored deliberately, and fulfilled mercilessly. The fire of 1666 did not just consume London. It tested the boundary between fate and free will. And as the calendar turns again, the question remains. When the next warning appears, will it be recognized for what it is, or dismissed until the flames make it undeniable? Because the most dangerous prophecies are not the ones that predict destruction. They are the ones that come true.
Did you like this mystery? And what is your theory? Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed it, then like and share. I'm Merc, and I'll be waiting for you in the next mystery.